Oh no! The white population is on the decline! But I'm white! Well, underneath this stuff. News of this devastating blow to American caucasity came after the Census Bureau released some of their preliminary findings from the 2020 census. News outlets across the internet breathlessly reported the Bureau's findings, pushing the terror-inducing narrative that the country's white population is in freefall and in imminent danger of being replaced by non-whites, otherwise known as most of the people on the planet, or just other people. But how can this be? What have we whites done wrong? I better watch some YouTubes about video game wokeness to find out. Except it turns out that putting a black girl in God of War isn't actually what did it. The Census Bureau indicated that the decline in the white population was directly related to rising infertility rates, the bog monster stalking us all since we became old enough to have kids. We've all heard about the dangers of waiting until after your 20s to have kids, often from creeps, including the oft-cited statistic that 1 in 3 women over the age of 35 will fail to conceive after a year of trying to get pregnant. Surely, some sort of biological issue is to blame for our mayonnaise complexion downfall. We waited too long to jackhammer little us's into the world, and now the sand in our biological hourglasses has run out. Damn you, rising infertility rates! Damn you, the hubris of the young! Rah! Frankenstein noise. Is all hope for the white future lost? Well, no, as it turns out, apart from how fucking wild it is that several major news outlets became Stormfront for a day and reported on the Census Bureau's findings like they were the title of a Goosebumps book for Nazis. The decline in the number of people identifying as white can be attributed to a number of factors, the most likely of which being more people are identifying as multiple races. In fact, when you take into account the 31 million white Americans who identified as biracial, the white population in the country actually increased. So not only was it irresponsible for news outlets to play into the idea of white normativity by framing the story as though being white is the correct or natural race, but the story itself wasn't even true. But hey, good job adding yourselves to the bibliography of the next mass shooter's manifesto. Because, and maybe this is the most important point here, but who fucking cares? Nobody's being replaced. You're not being deleted. There are just, new people. Look, the prevailing line of thinking among fertility experts is that it's difficult to draw broad conclusions about fertility for an entire population of people, because there are a number of unique factors to consider for any single person. Making demographic forecasts is notoriously difficult, and so it's pretty easy to take stuff like this census data or rough scientific estimates and create jaw-dropping headlines about how we're running out of people, while at the same time creating headlines about how we're running out of land because of overpopulation, and which is it? What should we be worried about? It's pretty interesting, actually. This combination of concern over having less white people, fertility stress, and overpopulation stories. I'm not sure if the news is doing it on purpose, but it all seems to perfectly fuel the kind of xenophobia these liberal elite news folk would be against. America is actually mostly empty. And while I'm not saying we should pack it shoulder to shoulder, it's weird that we get so scared of having too many people, while also being scared of having not enough of certain people. Also, they seem to fearmonger about this without going into what would actually be done to help, maybe make people comfortable and secure so they can and have kids. I don't know, again, not sure they're doing it on purpose so much as for the general purpose of keeping people perpetually frightened and stressed to the point of mental and physical exhaustion, the lack of treatment of which creates even more. Oh wait, except for white men. We just want them to be angry. Angry enough to secede? The country is so divided, you guys. It's ready to tear itself apart, you guys. Like a crudely stitched body of reanimated corpse limbs rejecting their hideous new existence. Following the January 6th Capitol riots, during which a bunch of angry, mostly white, mostly men stormed the Capitol building to attempt to overthrow the election and install this store-brand toaster strudel as the forever president, ravenous Trump supporters don't care to be part of this nation anymore, and are heck bent on starting another civil war. Heck bent, I say! According to a poll conducted by the University of Virginia Center for Politics, more than half of Trump voters agreed with the statement that the current situation is such that they would favor states seceding from the Union to form their own separate country. Furthermore, 82% of Trump supporters surveyed stated that the country needs a powerful leader to destroy the radical and immoral currents threatening our sanctified right to spit on minimum wage workers at Panera Bread. You know, a strong dictator-type guy to unilaterally eliminate the sort of dangerous undesirables who might, say, invade the nation's capital to violently overturn a free and fair election. But it's not just these goon-a-wieners who want to secede. That same UVA poll revealed that 41% of people who voted for Joe, good enough I guess if I squint, Biden, also supported the idea of secession, with 62% agreeing that the country needs a big strong daddy to annihilate all the people they don't like. Some conservative counties in Oregon are already trying to get legislation passed to remove themselves from Oregon and join Idaho to form a new state called Greater Idaho, with Texas floating similar legislation to remove themselves from these United States to form, I don't know, the United States of Texas and Idaho? Texaho. Idaxis. That sounds like an orbital sex parlor for mustachioed aliens. I'd vote for that. Sort of a Deep Space Nine for research. But it's just never going to happen. Remember CalExit? A bunch of Western states, including California and Oregon, regularly floated the idea of seceding and forming their own country during Trump's presidency. Wow, that phrase just is never gonna sound any less weird to say, huh? Trump's presidency. All right. Secession is a thing that regularly gets threatened. It happens all the damn time. Texas specifically keeps waving that shit around like an asshole in a Chili's, holding $1 in the air to make their appetizer platter come out faster. But Chili's don't care about your dollar, Andrew. It'll get there when it gets there. But it's never gonna happen. Probably because it's illegal. And you remember the whole Civil War thing that happened back in the 1860s? That was pretty bad, right? It remains the bloodiest conflict in American history, and we have absolutely no reason to believe it would go any differently the second time around. In fact, it would be a hell of a lot worse because our guns are better, and we also have planes now. Not saying it's impossible, but rather something a state would, really have to want. But Americans love to throw secession around, like they're telling their parents they're thinking about getting a tattoo. You know who might talk you out of taking the idea of secession so lightly? Any of the innumerable other countries around the world who have experienced civil wars in the past few decades. That shit devastates a country. Sometimes permanently. It destabilizes the government and collapses the economy. And let me tell you, the dollar has already used up a lot of its credibility around the globe. It's having to sneak in the back with a group of better, more glamorous currency and hope that the bouncer doesn't notice. Not to mention that it would open the country up to attacks from pretty much anywhere. America hasn't exactly been making too many friends for the past, hundred of years. We have no reason to believe that we wouldn't just get swarmed the second we destabilize, like Peter Stormare with those shitty little rat dinos in the Lost World. And we'd absolutely have it coming. Like Peter Stormare. So let's stop pretending that secession is even a thing that could possibly happen. It won't. It just won't. And even if some dummy managed to rally enough support from enough other dummies to sign legislation officially removing their state from the union, who the hell is going to enforce that? It would be one of those weird archaic laws from back when people thought farts were the devil's laughter. It says some shit like, you can't look at a moose with an erection between the hours of 4 and 6. And what do we do with that? The phrasing needs to be much clearer. Is the erection in question mine or the moose's? It's impossible to say. It's completely unenforceable. Much like a decree stating the state of Florida is now the proud nation of Hulkamania. It's just not in the cards. At least until the robot uprising is here. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.